Fetterman, for your incisive questions. It's my turn. I think I will be the last questioner. Ms. Sanchez-Adams, like an hour and a half ago, you gave your 6 recommendations. The CFPB, as you know, last year issued a proposed rule that would allow the consumer agency to supervise larger payment apps. What is this? Just walk through, if you would, what this proposed rule means for large payment apps like Venmo and Cash App and Zelle, and the consumers, what it means to consumers who use these platforms. Sort of give us a synopsis of what this rule is actually going to mean for sort of all the players.
So one thing is that nobody actually knew what was happening on these platforms until this committee sent a letter, right, asking for that information of how many people are actually getting reimbursed for unauthorized transactions and how many people are getting are not being reimbursed when they're scammed. Nobody had access to that information because they weren't supervised. So the CFPB being able to go in and supervise that means you'll actually know if they're following with the law, the law. So unless you were a private attorney who was suing them because a consumer came and told you a story, there was really no way to know what was happening behind the scenes. So that's why this rule is so important. And again, it's not just Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, but it's other players as well.
Thank you. And that really is the work this committee can do. We do oversight. We sometimes just inform the public and can ask questions like that. The larger participant rule, as you point out, will allow the agency to supervise these apps, ensuring that they follow consumer protection laws, and why we need a strong, independent CFPB. That's been said many, many, many times in this from this dais from a whole bunch of my colleagues. And I would also point out that this attendance is sometimes spotty in this committee, sometimes not. But this is such an important issue to so many that, at least on our side of the aisle, all but one member showed up, and a number of members on the other side too. And that's a good sign. Ms. Sanchez-Adams, you discussed the differences between unauthorized transactions and fraudulently induced transactions, with the major difference being that financial institutions are legally required to reimburse consumers for the unauthorized transactions. Does the same hold true for unauthorized transactions using wire fraud? Or consumers and their money really protected from scammers there?
No. As I had mentioned in detail, and I think in my written testimony, is the Uniform Commercial Code is the state law that applies to wire transfers, excluding international remittances. And it wasn't designed to be a consumer protection statute. It was designed for banks to know the procedures when using these. And so right now, it essentially says if there was a security procedure that the consumer and the bank agreed to, and the consumer doesn't really agree to it when it's in the fine print of something they're clicking to agree to be able to have an account, or often those terms say one that we may choose, one that we may call you or we may not call you. So if the banks use that procedure, then they argue that they don't have any liability, and it's pushed onto the consumer. This is why we really need wires to be covered by the EFTA.
Thank you. Mr. Breo, we're hearing more and more anecdotes about how scammers are using AI to create personalized attacks. For example, scammers, as you know, can use a consumer's voice from a social media post and use AI to replicate that consumer's voice to gain access to account information. How do Congress and regulators get ahead of these problems?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I certainly think that AI has the potential to be as big an accelerant of fraud as the internet was 30 years ago. And in addition to the voice cloning technology that you talked about, we are also very concerned that AI can be used by criminal scammers to basically supercharge the ability to identify the most vulnerable consumer. So we know that criminal gangs will fight over lists of potential victims in the U.S. that they want to use for many different kinds of scams. With AI, they can target with laser-like precision the consumers that they think are most vulnerable to these scams. So even if they don't need to use voice cloning, just being able to know the right people to contact, how to contact them, and the types of words to use to get them hooked on the hook for these frauds is one way that we are really concerned about how AI is going to be used. I think we are still developing sort of specific policy proposals that Congress could take, but I did appreciate what we heard earlier about treble damages against scammers using AI in this way. I think that's one area that this committee should consider, and we're happy to get back to you with additional policy proposals for how to start to tackle the threat that AI poses.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Last question, and be as brief as you can. I'm over my time, but this is the end, so that's fine. Mr. Benda, my colleagues and I wrote to your organization, the ABA, expressing concerns about the alarming increase in check fraud scams. Your organization created an information directory providing contact information for banks to resolve check fraud claims. That's good as far as it went. Has this directory improved the timeliness in which defrauded customers get their money back? It seems that banks' customers are all too often waiting too long for their money, not something that people often can afford when it's thousands of dollars. So assure me that it's more timely than that and that you're working to make it even more timely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you recognizing the efforts we've made on this. So the directory now encompasses almost 1,700 banks, and we have heard from many banks at how much better it has made their lives because they can actually file these claims faster. Are we where we want to be? No, we're not. And that is why we're continuing our efforts of reaching out to banks to try and expedite those processes, make sure they're more streamlined, make sure that we have better and more industry baselines in terms of the requirements to submit these claims so they can be processed faster.
Okay, well, someone from the Richmond Fed told me once, watch us and make sure you let us know that we're watching you. So we are in this case, so thank you. Thanks to the three of you, really good hearing, really informative, great interest from this committee. Senators who wish to submit questions for their hearing record, we have notified them they're due 1 week from today, the 8th of February. To the witnesses, please submit responses to any and all those questions within 45 days from the day we get them to you. Thank you very much. Committee's adjourned.